Hey guys, have you ever had to trigger the SOS feature on a Garmin InReach Mini 2? I haven't had to either, but a good friend of mine recently had to, and I'm gonna share his experiences a little bit later in the video. I also will give you some tricks if you ever have to trigger one. My name is Stefan Fischer from All Off Road. Thank you for joining me today. In addition to the real-life experience of triggering Garmin InReach Mini 2 SOS in Australia, I will also tell you everything about emergency communication devices. I will give you a quick overview of what's available. I show you exactly what I'm using, and I will also explain the differences between a two-way satellite messenger and a dedicated PLB. So in my opinion, anyone who does remote travel, and that be via four-wheel drive or if you're an avid hiker and you walk, should carry at least one emergency communication device. In this video I will go more into what I carry in my four-wheel drive, but also what I carry on my day hikes. As you can see here, I have a wide selection of emergency communication. Let me address everything quickly. So UHF radio is not really emergency communication, I would say, in the most cases, because the range is quite limited. However, no one really should travel in a four-wheel drive without a UHF. So I think that is one of the absolute minimum close distance communication devices you should have with you. I have two UHFs, two 5-watt UHFs in my car, fixed install. Why do I carry two? I often lead the trips, and as trip leader I have one UHF on the channel for the respective area, for example channel 10 in the Simpson Desert, and the second UHF radio is on our group channel, so we don't clog up the main channel with our chatter. I also have always at least one handheld UHF radio with me, and that is usually a good 5-watt radio. This year is the new GME XRS now as a handheld, but I also have some older commercial GME radios simply as a backup, and they are also quite helpful to coordinate recoveries. So always also have a handheld. I don't carry Starlink, and while I won't go too deep into Starlink, I don't regard Starlink as emergency communication, simply for the fact there's too many things to go wrong. Starlink relies on an external battery, Starlink relies on an antenna, and for example in case of an accident or a rollover, Starlink may not work. Look, Starlink great to have, and obviously if it's working that's another backup, but I certainly wouldn't have that as my sole emergency communication device. I don't have Starlink, so I carry a satellite phone. A satellite phone is quite handy because it allows you to speak to people. So for example, if you have medical issues which are not urgent, if you have mechanical issues and you need advice, a satellite phone is a good thing to carry as well. I have a Thuraya now for quite a few years. I'm with a pivotal plan. That means I can have an Australian number and people can actually call me for free. So if I'm away for 3 or 4 weeks, it works very well for me because the kids or the wife can call me for free on the Australian number, so it doesn't cost an arm and a leg. I have a $20 per month plan I'm on here. Yeah, calls are expensive if I make them, but again, I usually make a quick call, say call me back, and for the most people that is then a free call. So satellite phone is great, but I also would not have one as my only emergency communication. I have had instances with various phones, and I had Inmarsat, I had Iridium, and now Thuraya, where they did not work at times. So yeah, very good backup. The new iPhones, this is not one of them, but from iPhone 14 and up, the iPhones have a satellite emergency feature. And I think again that's a great backup, but I would not rely solely on an iPhone as emergency device unless you are walking maybe. Keep in mind, phone battery hardly lasts a day depending on how you use it, and a phone is usually used for many things nowadays. So I think if you have an iPhone 14 or 15 with the satellite emergency feature, that's a good backup, but not something I would rely on. So then next we have multiple two-way messengers. I have the Zoleo, I have the Spot, and I have the Garmin InReach Mini 2. I made individual videos about them. The Spot is really an old device. I wouldn't recommend at this stage anymore. It's very expensive. It has let me down more than any other device. So wouldn't really recommend that anymore. Then we have the Zoleo and Garmin InReach Mini 2. I made a dedicated video about it. Check it out. I prefer the Garmin InReach Mini 2 because it has more features than the Zoleo, and it hasn't let me down. The Zoleo has let me down in the bush.
Zoleo is on, doing its thing, but can't connect to the phone anymore. Restarted the phone, tried quite a few things, but won't connect to the phone. Restart the Zoleo. That's a bit of a bummer.
So the big advantage of, say, Zoleo and Garmin is that these are two-way messengers. That means you can actually text people and you can receive messages back. If you trigger SOS, the Emergency Response Center can also be in contact with you and can text you back. You can describe your situation. So I think that is very good. And if I go on walks, I only carry one of them, usually, to be honest, the Garmin, because it also has navigational features. The battery time is between 1 and 2 weeks, so that is quite decent. And if weight and space is a premium, yes, then I would rely only on one of the two-way messengers. However, the battery time is not forever. And as I said, I had issues with the Zoleo where it didn't work. The Zoleo also need to be tethered to a phone. With the Garmin, you can send and receive messages via the device. Not very comfortable, but possible. With the Zoleo, if you lose your phone or if that breaks, you can trigger SOS and you can trigger a check-in message, but that's it. You can't receive or send messages anymore. One of them I have with me and activated. They also create a breadcrumb trail which people can follow you on a map and see where you are. The Zoleo is fairly limited in that regards because it only tracks 1,000 points, but the Garmin pretty much can track a whole 2-3 weeks track. So another feature why I prefer the Garmin.
Both Zoleo and Garmin have a mobile phone app which makes receiving and sending texts much easier. And both devices also allow you to retrieve a weather forecast no matter where you are, and that is also a very useful feature. Both Garmin and Zoleo use the Iridium satellite system for coverage and have their emergency centers in the US. This means there's an extra step in the SOS response process, potentially affecting response time.
And then on top of that, we also have dedicated PLBs, that is a Personal Locator Beacon. Some people call them EPIRBs. However, EPIRBs are bigger and are for the marine environment. Even though they do work on land, they are much bigger, and really for land use, you should use a PLB, not an EPIRB. The benefit of a dedicated PLB, and I carry the GME MT610G with me, is that it has a 7-year battery life. So you very likely never run out of battery. It is a single purpose device, so you set it up, you trigger the SOS, and it will then send a signal out for 24 hours. Sometimes even longer, depends on the environment, the temperature and so on. And it is actually a little bit more accurate than these in regards to how you get found.
A PLB utilizes the dedicated COSPAS-SARSAT satellite system network and a global network of rescue centers that is unmatched in distress detection and reach. Any SOS signal sent off via a PLB in Australia goes straight to the Australian Search and Rescue Center and not to the US first.
So a PLB is, in my opinion, what every four-wheel driver as a minimum should have in the middle console of his car. Make sure that everyone in your group, for example for me, if I travel with my kids, the kids know where the PLB is. They also know how to activate it, so that is important. The PLB would be the last device I use if everything else has failed, and be talking about serious emergencies here, not if you run out of fuel or so. But yeah, these you should have as an absolute minimum in your car, and everything else in this list here then are optional extras. One of the advantage of the PLB also is that you only pay once the purchase price, then you register the PLB, and that's it. So there are no monthly costs. All other devices like Zoleo, Garmin, Spot, and the Satellite Phone have monthly extra cost. UHF radios, obviously you don't have any extra cost, you only pay the purchase price. So what I carry in my car or when I travel is the GME in the glove box, or actually in the middle console of my car. Then I have the Garmin, usually on the windscreen, and that also creates a breadcrumb trail, so my wife and Ground Charlie knows where I am. And if I go for any hikes, then this one goes into my day pack. I obviously also have at least one handheld plus my fixed installed GME radios in the car, and I also always carry the satellite phone. As I mentioned, I use that frequently to stay in contact with the family. I use it to get weather forecasts. I have used it to get mechanical advice. I have used it to get medical advice. So yeah, satellite phone I still reckon is a good investment, especially if you travel a lot. So I'm carrying the two-way messengers for quite some time now, but to be honest, I always was wondering how they really work if you trigger them, because unlike the dedicated PLB, which goes directly to an Australian rescue center, these two devices trigger an emergency response center which is overseas, and that then coordinates back to Australia. So one of my friends is an avid bushwalker, Dave, shout out to you. These guys do some pretty full-on canyoning on multi-day trips, and one in their party got hurt, actually not on any of the difficult parts, but just walking in the creek bed, slipping on a rock and hurting his head, and they had to trigger InReach Mini 2 to get rescue via helicopter. So let me explain a little bit how that worked.
My friend's group recent two-day trek through Wounded Knee Canyon highlighted the unpredictable nature of outdoor adventures. Their journey involved navigating rugged terrain, executing long abseils, including a significant descent to the Kolo River, and setting up camp along its banks. The return route involved crossing Wollamai Creek, transitioning from calm sandy beaches to a landscape dominated by boulders. An unforeseen incident occurred on the seemingly safer segment of the trek. A participant slipped on a wet rock while walking along the creek bed, resulting in a severe head injury and unconsciousness. The fall was severe enough to cause a neck fracture, necessitating an helicopter evacuation. This unfortunate event underscores not only the unpredictability of accidents, even in low-risk situations, but also the critical importance of carrying emergency communication devices on such expeditions. Having the means to quickly call for help in remote locations is vital, emphasizing the need for preparedness and caution at all times during wilderness exploration. When the SOS button on their Garmin InReach device was pressed, the response was remarkably swift, with engagement occurring within a minute. However, the initial fix on their position was less than ideal. The InReach device requires around 5 minutes to accurately lock onto GPS satellites for a precise location. This highlights a critical tip for the user. It's advisable to activate the device and then ideally allow a 5 to 10 minute window before sending out an SOS. This approach ensures the device provides a more accurate initial position to the rescuers. As time progressed, the accuracy of their location improving significantly, enabling the rescue helicopter to pinpoint their whereabouts easily. It became evident, however, that setting GPS coordinates to decimal degrees for effective communication with emergency services. Message exchanges during the rescue operation had an approximate latency of 10 minutes, attributed to the reliance on the Iridium satellite for communication. These resulted in some overlap in the message exchanges. The rescue operation involved multiple parties: Garmin in Texas, the first responder, Australia Search and Rescue in Canberra, and the local New South Wales emergency services, including police, ambulance, and helicopter rescue teams. The communication across this multi-layered chain occasionally led to minor confusion, as messages were passed through the various levels of command. It's also interesting to note that Garmin and Search Rescue in Canberra both reached out to the emergency contacts of the person to get further information. Upon reflection, the use of the InReach device demonstrated a distinct advantage in regards to two-way communication, which a PLB does not have. The immediate acknowledgement of the distress signal and the ability to convey detailed information about the emergency situation allowed for more efficient and tailored responses from the emergency services. This incident underscores the invaluable role of technology in modern search and rescue operations and offers a key insight for optimizing the use of such devices in future emergencies. So let me take you through the direct message exchange on the Garmin InReach Mini 2, starting with the initial SOS button press. This interaction begins with the Garmin Response Center directly and concludes with the Australian Search and Rescue team. Remarkably, the response times were swift, even with the involvement of an overseas emergency response center. Special thanks to Dave Knighton, the courageous individual involved, Guy Whitting, and the dedicated rescue staff for their generosity in sharing this story. For additional insights, be sure to check out Guy's YouTube channel. The person involved is on the path to recovery following significant injuries. Let me briefly provide you my thoughts about the incident and whether I change anything in my routine. The two-way messaging capability of triggering an SOS, providing a significant advantage, offering assurance that your distress signal has been received, and enabling clear situation description. This functionality is a distinct benefit over traditional personal locator beacons (PLBs). However, my primary concerns lie with the initial contact being an overseas emergency response center, introducing an additional layer and potentially a higher risk of error. The effectiveness largely depends on the ERC staff at the time, and there have been instances online of less than optimal responses. Activating a PLB sends a direct signal to the Rescue Coordination Center in Canberra, offering a slightly faster response with fewer intermediaries and no overseas involvement. PLBs operate on the 406 MHz band and the 121.5 MHz frequencies, integrating into the global COSPAS-SASAT rescue system. This is designed expressively for emergencies. PLBs emit a one-way distress signal capable of penetrating clouds and forest canopy due to its lower frequencies. PLBs also do not require a subscription and are universally recognized. Unlike two-way messengers like Garmin and Zoleo, which lack a continuous beacon feature and don't utilize the 121.5 MHz frequency for homing, PLBs are equipped with these capabilities. This is an important benefit for PLB as it aids search and rescue teams in locating the beacon once they are closed in, and it is also detectable by aircraft. For activities where space and weight are limited, such as hiking, I rely solely on my Garmin InReach Mini 2. However, for four-wheel drive adventures, I also always carry a GME MT610G PLB in the middle console of my car. Let me give you some examples how my emergency protocol would be. In most cases, I would use the Garmin InReach Mini 2 to trigger an SOS. for immediate feedback and to describe the situation. Especially if you're hiking in a group, I would suggest that everyone has a personal locator beacon or a Garmin InReach, and ideally you mix it up so that you have a two-way messenger available, but also a PLB if that should fail. However, let's imagine I rode the four-wheel drive and I might be incapacitated. I may be going in and out of consciousness after an accident. In that case, I definitely would opt for the PLB because it is set and forget, and it would ensure a minimum of 24-hour signal broadcast.
So guys, I hope you found that information as interesting as I did at the time, because I didn't have any first-hand account from someone I know how it really works when you trigger one of them. So I thought that's good information to share. As always guys, this is a self-funded channel and the YouTube revenue hardly covers the cost for the fuel of one trip. So if you like my content, I would greatly appreciate if you could head over to Patreon and become one of my Patreon supporters. With the equivalent of a cup of coffee or two per month, you can really help me creating these videos for you. Thank you very much, and I hope to see you along the tracks.